Ladies and gentlemen, we are back for another season of hockey with you guys. We've been gone all summer. We took some time to ourselves, but you know what? It's the 2023-2024 season, and we're ready to go again.
I'm excited to be back. We're excited to be back. My name is Hohen, and this is Scott, and this is the Honest Hockey Take. So we're in second year now, and we're excited to share our season previews again.
Yeah, so what we're going to start off for this season is we're going to go through a season preview for all four of the divisions. We're going to go through each team individually, talk about them a bit, some of the moves they had in the offseason, who they lost, who they got, and where we think they're going to go. Now, Boston may have had one of the most interesting off seasons of all. This team absolutely dominant last year, won the President's Trophy. Unfortunately, in the playoffs, didn't work for them. They got knocked out by Florida early in round one. But this team has made some dramatic changes. First off, we got to start with how many guys they lost. Patrice Bergeron retiring. David Krejci as well gone. Some of these guys that have been there for so long. I mean, these two guys have played on that team forever, it feels like. It's going to be a significant loss.
It's a huge loss. They also lost Taylor Hall, who was the highest producing point player in the playoffs.
Yeah, he had a really good playoff series.
Dmitry Orlov is another one that they lost. To me, it's not a big loss there, but is another player that they lost off the raw roster. In addition, they got, for the additions, they got Milan Lucic. Ooh, let's see if this guy can save the team, eh?
Yeah, not 2010 though.
Shattenkirk they added. So it's going to be a very interesting year, especially with Pavel Zacha being the number one center on this team. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, let's look at some strengths and weaknesses of this team right now. I mean, when I look at the Boston Bruins, I look at their defense, and I'm pretty confident in it. Honestly, I really like that core, especially the big four there. When you got guys like Charlie McAvoy, who's an absolute stud, and then Hampus Lindholm last year was phenomenal. I mean, this guy was getting tons of votes. I think he was like 5th in the Norris voting. It was incredible. And then, of course, Matt Grzelcyk, and then as well, Brandon Carlo. These guys have been there for a while. Really solid two-way defenseman, and it's just incredible core to start with.
Yep, and on top of that, they have terrific goaltending. Jeremy Swayman's a very good proven goaltender in my opinion. He's a young goaltender, and they just signed him for that 1-year contract. And I also, obviously, everyone knows about Linus Ullmark, how well he played last year. He's a Vezina winner, so he's going to be pretty good, I think, especially in front of that D-core that Scott just alluded to. The forward group is a little bit, in my opinion, is a little bit lacking here now, especially with their retirees. With no more Krejci and no more Bergeron's got one of the weakest center depth in all of NHL.
Yeah, it's bad. We can't sugarcoat it. I mean, Pavel Zacha as your number one center is not exactly ideal. Granted, I will say he had a pretty decent year last year, but it helps when you're sheltered by having these other centers behind you that can play really good hockey. I'm a little concerned for their depth scoring. First of all, when I look at this team, I know Pasta's going to get his. I know Marchand's going to play well when he's there, when he's healthy. I mean, he hasn't played a full year in a while, but I mean, he's still one hell of a great player. I think that Pasta is still probably going to be around that 60-goal mark because the guy is just too talented and he's still going to get all those power play opportunities. But I don't think the second, third, fourth line are going to be able to get it done for the scoring that this team needs.
No, and another big player I'm going to be watching this year is going to be Jake DeBrusk. This guy has been taking forever to explode in this league. He has still to this day has not really exploded in this league, in my opinion. He needs to be an X factor in this team for sure.
He did show signs last year, he was better. I thought he was better, at least for the most part. But yeah, he does have another gear he's going to have to hit if this team is going to return to the playoffs and actually make a run. One thing I'm excited to see about this team is I want to see the goaltending. I mean, Swayman had such good potential, and last year Ullmark was just flawless. So I want to see what's going to happen with that, if they continue to ride Ullmark all the time, or for a majority of the year, or if Swayman actually starts to kind of take over if Ullmark falters like he did in the playoffs.
Yep. The nenext team that we have is the Buffalo Sabres. Now, this team, I really like this team. This team actually showed some nice push in the end of the season last year. Yeah, they had especially Rasmus Dahlin had a really hot start there. He kind of dropped off a little bit as expected. Usually players don't keep that pace that he was going on throughout the whole season. But this team added Eric Johnson and subtracted Lyubushkin. Literally, that's all they did all season. They're going to have to rely on Bert Levi to be their starting goaltender or Pekka Luukkonen. So we'll see how they do.
Yeah, for me, when I look at this, one of the teams that made the fewest amount of moves ins and out. I mean, really not anything groundbreaking there. But what I'm going to look for, I think, in addition-wise, is Devin Levi came in really late last year. So I'm going to count him basically as an addition this year because we really didn't get to see him much. And I think that's going to be one of the big X factors on how this team does. This guy had a lot of promise as a prospect. He is probably going to be better than anything they've had in the last couple years goaltending-wise. So I look forward to that and see if Levi can actually play like 50, 55 games and carry the load and get this team into the playoffs.
Yeah, the biggest question mark for me for the Buffalo Sabres has always been the depth defenseman and the goaltending. So, like Scott said, if Levi is the guy, he's got to be able to handle the workload.
Yeah, he's got to take them over the hump.
Yeah.
Looking at this defense, so obviously there's a lot to like when you look at guys like Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Power. Owen Power last year, nominated for Rookie of the Year, didn't win it, but I mean, heck of a good season for him. Very underrated season, honestly. Good two-way defenseman. He had some offense. You know he's reliable. I mean, big body player, really nice to have. And then Rasmus Dahlin, finally the breakthrough we've all been waiting for. I mean, this guy, first overall pick, really great player, and he has just absolutely crushed it last year. Top 3 in scoring. This guy was dynamic on the power play. He was playing better two-way hockey. He wasn't a big minus player this year. I was just really impressed by him.
Yeah, another player I really like on that blue line is Samuelsson. No one really talks about him, but he is a terrific defenseman, and he plays really, really, really well with Rasmus Dahlin. Rasmus Dahlin cannot be as good as he is without Samuelsson, because Samuelsson is back there covering him for all his mistakes, in my opinion. So yeah. He's signed for a long time for the Buffalo Sabres and a good contract. As for the forward group, Tage Thompson, led by Tage Thompson in my mind. They were really, really good last year with the line with Alex Tuch, him and Jeff Skinner. Nothing surprising here. I think they're going to be good again this year. I don't know how good, but they're going to be good again. The Dylan Cousins really showed up. JJ Peterka, we'll see how he does.
Yeah, so this team last year had a lot of breakout players on offense. Whether it was Dylan Cousins or Tage Thompson, these guys really announced themselves on the scene and just absolutely went crazy. I mean, Tage got over 100 points, which is kind of ridiculous. And Dylan Cousins at one point was on pace for a point per game. Fell just short of that by the end of the year because he kind of had a rough last 20 games. But I mean, for a second line player, that's absolutely fantastic production, especially at his age. I really looked for this team to see two things. One, if that offense and those breakout players that were young last year continue to be that dominant, or if it was like a one-year wonder type thing, or if their secondary scoring can bring it a little bit more. They're going to be without, we didn't talk about this in the additions and subtraction, but Jack Quinn is going to be missing 6 months this year, likely going to play only the last third of the season. So that'll be interesting to see how they do with JJ Peterka without him now. Next up, the Detroit Red Wings, and my gosh, guys, if we're talking about additions and subtractions, it's going to be like I busted out the Bible. There is such a long list of additions by Stevie Y this offseason. This guy has no fear to go out there and just add a bunch of new pieces and see how it gels. I mean, obviously, I'm going to start off with the biggest addition, Alex DeBrincat. Had a bit of a down year with Ottawa last year, so, I mean, it was kind of like, I don't know really what they're going to do with this guy in this offense. Likely probably going to play him with Larkin. But this guy is a proven 40-goal scorer in the past, and he is kind of what Detroit's been needing, which is a true goal scorer. Next up, they also went out and got some key defensemen added onto their team. Shane Gostisbehere, I'm not personally the biggest fan of Gostisbehere, but this guy adds some offense, and they kind of need that with that blue line.
Yeah, they also added JT Compher from Colorado. JT Compher has proven that he can play in second line or third line center. He has done those jobs really, really well, and sometimes he was on the power play for the Colorado Avalanche, so he can definitely go on the power play if he needs to be. They also added Klim Kostin from the Oilers, got a fourth line guy who can hit. The list goes on with this team. They added so many players. Justin Hall, I'm not a big fan of this signing at all. Signed him for $4 million. I think it's a little high for a player of his caliber.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Petrie. Yeah, so that'd be interesting to see what they do with that core six of D. I kind of expected Simon Evanson to get a bit more run this year, but when I look at their defense, right now, currently, there doesn't seem to be a lot of room for him. So he might be someone who doesn't play very much unless there's an injury.
Yeah, and on the forward side, what do you like about it?
I look at that, and their lines look so different from last year. It's crazy. All these additions, whether it's JT Compher or DeBrincat or Klim Kostin, there's pretty much a new player on every single line on this team. Like I said before, I look to see the difference of the chemistry now with Larkin, Raymond, and DeBrincat. I'm assuming that's going to be their first line right now. And I think it's a decent first line. I do think it's an upgrade. I don't know if DeBrincat's that guy who can be like a true superstar, but he definitely adds the scoring that this team needed.
Yeah, this team kind of worries me a little bit. I think they added way too many faces, too many. Usually when they add this many players in the offseason, the chemistry disrupts the chemistry for sure. So we're gonna see what happens with the Detroit Red Wings. But it's good that Stevie Y was proactive this offseason and really needed to make some changes to this roster, and he did.
Yeah, no, I give the guy credit. I mean, he's certainly trying his best. He's going out there and he's making active moves. A lot of teams wish their GMs did that because a lot of teams just have GMs that stay the course and never change anything for 4 or 5 years, and then nothing really changes with the franchise.
One question I want to ask you, what do you think about Ville Husso this season?
Yeah, we got to get to the goaltending before we're done with this. And Ville Husso, in my mind, had a pretty good first half of the season last year. I thought he played really good hockey, and I was like, wow, this contract's aging better than I thought it would for a guy who I thought maybe was a one-year wonder. But he really crushed it the first 40 games of last year. Unfortunately, kind of near the second half of the season, like most of the Red Wings players, the team kind of took a bit of a dive. They started over 500 in the first half, but also Ville Husso's game came down. So I'm interested to see which side of Ville Husso we're going to get, the guy from the first half or the second half guy who was kind of like more like 3.5 goals against type of player.
And the next team that we have on the list is the Florida Panthers. Now, the Florida Panthers, as everyone knew, that in the hockey world, that they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals last year as the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. Matthew Tkachuk really carried the load. I just want to congratulate Florida for making it that far.
Oh, it was a hell of a run.
Hell of a run.
It made the playoffs.
We did not make a Stanley Cup review of that review video, but congrats to Florida for making it that far. I never saw that coming. Good on them. Matthew Tkachuk really carried the load there. But with this team this year, is a lot different looking. They added OEL from Vancouver Canucks for a really good contract. Added Evan Rodriguez, and they also added Mikola, but they also lost a lot of players in Anthony Duclair, a player I actually kind of really like. The Stahl brothers, Alex Lyon, and they also lost Radko Gudas.
Oof, how will they do without Gudas, man?
Yeah,
I don't know.
And the thing is, I find Radko Gudas is such a key component to that team because he was that guy that no one wanted to play against on the back end.
Yeah, he kept people honest. Radko Gudas, the hardest hitting guy in the league pretty much. I swear this guy gets almost 400 hits every single season. Very physical player. You don't want to mess with this guy. And I think automatically that kind of makes their defense a little softer to go against. You don't have that threat of a guy who you don't want to mess with. And if you go near the corner, he is going to absolutely smash you. When I look at this team overall, I think this team is going to have a little bit of a harder time. They have some injuries to start the year, players who aren't going to be playing. It's going to be a little rough. Obviously, we saw Tkachuk get hurt in the playoffs. We saw Ekblad play through a million injuries, but he is not well right now. And it's going to be interesting to see how long these guys miss to start the year, and that could impact the chances for Florida to making it back to the playoffs again. Yeah,
another player in question is Brandon Montour. He had a crazy season last year. Everyone saw that, and he put up crazy unreal numbers. But I've heard that he's injured as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of injuries.
And on top of that, another question mark is also, can these players replicate what they did last year? It's a big question to me.
Yeah, guys like Brandon Montour who just had absolutely unbelievable season. It's going to be interesting to see if he can do that same type of season again. First time we saw him do that, it was truly a breakout year. And then obviously guys like Tkachuk who were being talked about as a top 5 player in the world after what he did last year. So if he can keep that 100-point pace up when he does return, it should be interesting for this offense because I do think this offense struggles with depth.
Yeah. And also another question mark is now that they lost Alex Lyon who I thought played really well when he played hockey for them in the playoffs, and now they're gonna have to rely on the Sergei Bobrovsky, and Sergei Bobrovsky is 1 year older, and I just don't think he's gonna play as well as he did last year.
I'm pretty sure Spencer Knight will be back from his assistance program there. I'm pretty sure he's going to be okay. This guy was a top goalie prospect for a long time. I do think he'll rebound and be a good NHL goaltender for this team. I worry about their defensive depth. When you have guys that are already out that are at the top of your defensive core and you've shipped out Radko Gudas, I really think this could be, to start the year, one of the worst defensive units in the NHL. Yeah, and on top of that, they played a lot of games last year. And usually when a team... Historically, when they play that many games, you're fatigued.
You're fatigued. You don't start the season as well than following season.
No, I was talking to Hohen a bit about this, but a lot of these teams that make it to the Stanley Cup final and lose tend to not have the best year right after. So we'll see if Florida can curb that and be successful and make the playoffs again, and hey, maybe go on another run. Next up, we got the Montreal Canadiens, one of the youngest teams in this division and a team that is trying to build something special. They have so many prospects right now waiting to come up. It'll be interesting to see which of these guys can come in. But we're going to talk to you first about the guys that they did bring in for real and they're for sure going to play. Casey DeSmith, likely to be the backup goaltender they added to this team now from Pittsburgh. DeSmith is very up and down. I don't really know how he'll do here. But, I mean, it's good to have some insurance, especially in net. And then Alex Newhook. One of the biggest trades they made going into the NHL entry draft last year was acquiring Alex Newhook. This guy kind of had a lot of potential. I mean, he was drafted 15th overall a couple years ago. Unfortunately, he didn't work out with Colorado. Now, we can argue that for a couple reasons. Too much depth on Colorado, hard to get opportunities on the power play and stuff like that. But also, the games I did watch the guy personally, I didn't think that he was doing very well. He didn't look very comfortable out there, and he didn't look very aware. It should be interesting to see, though. He's probably going to get a really good shot with this team as like a redemption project player, and he's already been signed to a new contract. So,
I don't think there's any excuse for Alexander Newhook for the fact that Colorado were so beat up in that playoffs last year, and this guy still wasn't a difference maker whatsoever.
It didn't really help. No.
He didn't do anything in that playoff run, and that's embarrassing to me. I don't think Alexander Newhook is the answer for this team, but also this team knows that they're a bottom-feeding team this year again.
It's a free shot.
It's a free shot. Yeah. They're going to play a lot of the young guys. They're going to play a lot of to make sure that those guys get a lot of more experience under the belt. Juraj Slafkovsky most likely will play the full season this year. Most likely.
Yeah, I look forward to Slav. Second-year player, has some experience, big body guy, really good prospect still. I don't think he's going to be a full bust. I think he'll find his game.
Yeah.
Looking at some of the departures, though, big one, obviously, Joel Edmondson, really solid top four defenseman for this team for a while, and he's gone now to the Washington Capitals. Also, losing Jonathan Drouin, I'm sure a lot of Habs fans are really happy about that. I feel like no one that I know, at least that's a Habs fan, wanted Jonathan Drouin there. So that might be a positive for this team. And then finally, Mike Hoffman. I mean, this guy feels like he has a new team every couple years. It's just standard. We kind of knew he was going to be a rental for Montreal, and now he's gone. But that also opens up a lot of opportunity for their young players.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with this team. Don't love their goaltending either. I believe it's Jake Allen and Montembeault.
Actually, Montembeault, I will say, for a team that didn't necessarily have the best team in front of him, he played pretty well.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. This team is in the bottom of the standings again this year. I don't want to say it too soon. We're going to do a standing prediction later, but I think a lot of people have Montreal in the bottom here.
I think a win and what to watch for Montreal is that their young players are taking forward steps. Yeah. I don't think if I was a Montreal fan, I wouldn't expect everything to just change all of a sudden or for them to have 10 or 15 more points in the standings, but rather just to have the individual players, guys like Slafkovsky, be more like showing signs of progression and actually getting some more points and being more aware of the play. Guys like Suzuki and Caulfield continuing their thing, building chemistry to eventually become one of the better duos in this division over the next 2-3 years maybe. But yeah, it's about progression for this team more than anything.
And on to the next team, and this team I am extremely excited about.
Me too.
And it's the Ottawa Senators. And I think this team is going to surprise a lot of people. I think this team is a very, very good team. They added, in the offseason, they went out and added Vladimir Tarasenko, who's a terrific 25 to 35 goal scorer at this stage in his career. And they added a new number one goaltender in Joonas Korpisalo. And I watched this guy closely during the playoff run, and he is pretty good. So, this team I think is going to be very, very competitive. And then obviously they get some key injuries back from last season. They didn't have Josh Norris playing almost at all last season.
That's like a whole addition in itself.
That's a whole addition in itself as either the first line center or the second line center. Doesn't matter where he is. He is going to be a huge addition to that team.
Yeah, honestly, their top six looks absolutely stacked. I mean, we saw what Stützle could do last year with Brady Tkachuk, but now that you have Josh Norris coming back and you get Vladimir Tarasenko on the wing, guy who's been proven 30-goal scorer many times in his career, I look forward to this. I mean, honestly, I thought Tarasenko was pretty decent in the last 2 years. I mean, 2 years ago, he had like 80 points. Last year, he was down a bit, but he still had a really good season, and he was one of the better players for the Rangers in the playoffs.
And I really like Shane Pinto being the third-line center on this team. Can you believe he's third line center?
And this team on paper is a very nice team.
A very good team. And then Alex Formenton being a third to fourth line player, unreal.
Yeah. But we got to talk about some subtractions this team had. Obviously, the big one we talked about earlier, this team lost Alex DeBrincat. Once again, I didn't really think he was a great fit with this team. I never really felt like he fit in with Ottawa, and he didn't seem to really want to be there. So it sucks to lose a player of his caliber that's a really good goal scorer, but they filled the hole with Tarasenko, so I'm going to call it pretty much a wash. And then Cam Talbot. I really thought Talbot would do a little bit better with this team. I know he's kind of starting to get up there in age, but he really didn't really excel. And it's going to be nice to see Korpisalo basically replacing him. It's in and out, very similar transactions.
Yeah, and now let's talk about that defense core. Now this defense core looked really, really good to me. They just signed Jake Sanderson to a very expensive contract, in my opinion. It's a little early, in my opinion.
It is early, but it will probably age well.
Yeah, and they obviously added Jacob Chikrin last year, who is a terrific number 2 or number 1 defenseman on this team. They have Shabbat, and who am I missing?
Oh man, they got like Brandstrom still coming back, although I'm not a big fan of Brandstrom. But I mean, just like having a top 4 like that, and then having guys like Artem Zub, who is a solid defensive defenseman. I like their core of 6 a lot.
Yeah, I think that we don't have to really worry about this team this year. I think this team isn't really going to surprise many people. They're just good all the way from top to bottom, in my opinion.
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to worry about, and it's not really in like the forwards defense goaltending category, is their coach. I don't know if that guy's the right guy for the job. I mean, he's kind of seemed to struggle with some really nice rosters the last 2 years and kind of not getting it done win-wise. So we'll look to see if they get off to a hot start, and if not, we might see a coaching change in Ottawa. Next up, we got the Tampa Bay Lightning, and unfortunately for the Tampa Bay Lightning, with great success comes great losses. It's pretty much impossible to afford everybody on a team that has been to 3 cup finals in a row before last year, and we're starting to see the decline. I mean, last year they did lose first round to the Toronto Maple Leafs, giving them their first win in like 19 years, but also with the contracts they've had to sign in recent years, they had to get rid of a lot of players this offseason. Guys like Corey Perry, Ross Colton, a good young player for them, is also gone. Alex Killorn, longtime Tampa player as well, had to leave. This is a pretty big loss. That's 3 guys already out of their top 12 from last year.
Yeah, I know. On top of that, I know they lost this guy last year, but losing McDonough in that defense was a big hole.
We saw the difference in the playoffs.
We saw the difference in the playoffs, and they lost even more players this year, and I don't know where this team's going to go this upcoming season. It's going to be a big question mark. This team is still good, but it's just, obviously, I think they're going to regress even more this season. The number 1 line you never question. The Stamkos with Braden Point and Nikita Khrushchev. Khrushchev is going to have a terrific season. I just know it. He's always has. The only question with him is the injury concerns. Mm-hmm. He is injury prone, but when he is playing, he is one of the best in the league.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's an unreal player. Their offense is still pretty good. 2 guys they added to fill in this year for that like top 9 type of role. Tyler Mott, really solid player. Not going to get you a lot of points, but I mean, you can rely on him for like middle 6 or bottom 6 minutes. And then Connor Sheary, who actually is shown to be quite flexible. I know played for Washington Capitals, my favorite team, and we kind of used him everywhere, whether it was the first line, second line, or third line. This guy can go up and down, and I'm sure that that's what John Cooper is going to do with him a lot this season to see where the chemistry can be built.
What do you think about the Hagel contract that he signed?
It was a little more than I thought he would get, but I think necessary in the way that he fit in like a glove playing with Kucherov and with Point. That line was really dynamic. It allowed Stamkos to go down the lineup and be that second line center and actually kind of create some depth for their team, which is really good. It's going to be interesting to see for me when I look at this team as the second line. I know the first line is going to be good. Like we said, Kucherov's a stud, Point's an amazing player, and Hagel fit in really well. With Stammer there, with Cirelli, I don't know what else they're going to do with that line. Who's going to play? Is it going to be Sheary? Is it going to be one of the other younger kids getting an opportunity? Maybe they just move Nick Paul up there, but it would be weird because he's also usually a center. So I really don't know what they're going to do with the depth of this team. That's the biggest issue for me.
Yeah, that's a big issue for me as well. But now let's look at that defense. What do you think about that defense led by Victor Hedman?
I mean, Hedman kind of had one of his worst years, at least offensively, I've seen in a while. I still think he's one of the best defensemen in the league, 2-way guys. Really good shot blocker. You can rely on him. Big body. Really good at boxing people out. So, I mean, obviously, Hedman's just a stud. I'm not really worried about him that much, even with a down year. Sergachev last year, wow. This guy has been good for a while, but now he added that offensive punch to his game along with his good defensive play, his hard hitting, and his shot blocking. It gives him a really solid 1-2 that not many teams in the league have.
Yeah, Chernak, obviously, if he comes in and plays healthy,
that's a big one because he is a really solid defender.
And then on top of that, I really like how Perbix played last year, actually.
Yeah, surprising. Perbix really kind of stepped in there and did pretty solid. Guys like Ian Cole too, I mean, for a bit. But
I look at most of these teams' depth, a lot of teams don't have a really good third pairing defense. So it's good that they got some decent players down there now, but. We'll see how. I'm very curious to see how Victor Hedman rebounds this season because he had one of the worst seasons I've ever seen him play. But I know Victor Hedman's still in my mind a top 5 defenseman in this league, and I want to see him rebound this year.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he will, honestly. And then the goaltending, I mean, we really don't even need to talk about this. I mean, Vasilevsky has been just absolutely unbelievable for so long, and he really doesn't have bad years. His bad years are good years for most goaltenders in the league, like I'd say 90% of them. So we can't really hate on that. He did kind of show some weakness in the playoffs with the long shots from the point. They kind of exposed that narrative that he didn't see them well. So I'm interested to see if in the offseason he kind of has worked on that maybe after being called out for being terrible at this, whether it's true or not. But it should be interesting to see how he plays in this regular season.
Yeah, I have no questions about Vasilevsky's performance. I know he's one of the top goaltenders in the league. My question with Tampa's goaltending is always the backup goalie. Every time they put the backup goalie in, they don't win the games.
It feels like that does happen a lot.
Yeah, so they need the backup goalie to steal a few games here and there, and they'll be okay.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how this team does, quite honestly, this year.
And the final team in this division is the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, this team added some really good players, actually. They added Max Domi. They added Klingberg. They also added Tyler Bertuzzi. And they also added Ryan Reeves. So 3 really heavy-hitting players, physical players, and then they added offensive defensemen. And I like Klingberg, actually. I think on this team, he could be very, very good. He was good on Dallas Stars back in the day. So I could see him being pretty good on this team.
You can definitely see what they were trying to do here. I mean, like Cohen said, they added a bunch of heavy hitters. When you're going out and getting Tyler Bertuzzi, Ryan Reeves, and Max Domi, you're making it clear. You want your team to be a better playoff team. You want your team to have more grit. You want them to be able to get in the corners, stand in front of the net, be more physical. This team is saying, we're not going to get walked on this year. We're going to be a different type of Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, every time I watch Toronto games in years past, they always have a solid 4 players on that top 6. But they always had to fill holes on the other 2 players to make 5 and 6. Now they added Max Domi and Tyler Bertuzzi, which in my opinion are perfect fits on that top 6.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just seeing what they do with Matthew Knies will be interesting. I'm going to count him as an addition, even though he's just a young kid coming up right now, because, I mean, he barely played in the regular season last year. We saw him a bit in the playoffs before he got hurt. Another guy who's very physical, very aggressive, even for a youngster, and it'll be interesting to see what they do with their top 6, because Toronto has a really good problem to have, and that is too many good players. So I don't know where everyone's going to play officially by the time the season starts, but they're going to have a really dirty, top 6 and probably top 9.
Yeah, this is very exciting because I've never seen, since the Austin Matthews era, I've never seen this team having physical players on the forward.
At least not like this.
Yeah, not like this. So it's going to be very exciting to see how this Toronto Maple Leafs do this season.
Yeah, now we got to talk about some guys that they actually lost to change this up and open spots for these guys. And we'll start off with one that I'm sure a lot of Leafs fans were excited with, and that is Justin Holl being shipped out of town. I know this guy was the butt of a lot of jokes for the Toronto Maple Leafs fan base, and they're probably ecstatic to see him gone. I know the coach really seemed to like him for a lot of years, but a lot of numbers show he was kind of a liability, especially in the playoffs, so that might be a plus for Toronto. And then Michael Bunting. Some of those penalties he took in that Tampa series where he got suspended for hurting Chernak, just cost his team a lot. I mean, sure, they won that series, but he just never seemed to really gel in the playoffs and took some really bad penalties.
And then another player that they lost, who I really like actually, is Noah Acciari. He's a solid number 4 center on that team. And obviously the new GM over in Pittsburgh took him because he liked him.
Yeah.
And then another player that they lost is Alexander Kerfoot. Actually, I think this one's a good subtraction. I never really liked Kerfoot on this team, quite honestly. So this was a good one to get off the books. Especially, I thought he was getting paid too much money anyways.
I do think Kerfoot wasn't terrible, but I think they used the money better with some of the new additions that they had, absolutely. So we know their offense is loaded. We got to talk a little bit about this team's defense, though, going into the year. It's going to be interesting, to say the least. I really don't know what to make of this defense. I mean, I know they can get some points when you got guys like Klingberg added there now. Morgan Rielly has shown he can put up some pretty good point totals as well. Played pretty solid defensively last year. In my opinion, he was the best Maple Leaf in the playoffs. Morgan Rielly just absolutely went off. All-around game was just really solid, and it definitely wasn't his fault that they lost.
They also have Mark Giordano on this team. I wonder how many minutes he's going to play because I think at this point, I think you don't play him as much anymore. They got TJ Brody. What do you think about TJ Brody's game?
TJ Brody sometimes gets a lot of hate, but he actually adds a pretty good amount for this team. He's a pretty solid defensive defenseman. I didn't actually think he'd be that good with this team originally when he went there from Calgary, but he's kind of proven me wrong. He's definitely one of the more underrated players on this team. And then I'm really interested to see how Timothy Liljegren does. He's going to get more opportunity this year. Like, for sure, his minutes are going to go up. If he can show that he can handle it and maybe even be in a top 4 role before the year ends, that could be actually huge for a former first-round pick.
Yeah, for the defense side, I think the biggest addition was not having Justin Holl on this team.
That could change a lot. I mean, it seems like this guy made so many mental gaffes and errors with the puck that cost his team in big moments. So the fans won't have that excuse anymore to use.
Yep. Now flipping over to the goaltending. Now they got Ilya Samsonov. I mean, he's a good goaltender. Do I think he's a starting goaltender? Yeah, he's a starting goaltender, but I think he's a fringe starting goaltender. I don't think he's a really, really good goaltender, but I think he's good enough to start.
Yeah, so I look at Ilya Samsonov, and I think of tale of two seasons. His regular season last year was absolutely phenomenal. He crushed. I mean, Hohen can say average or whatever, but he absolutely crushed the regular season, stood out. His numbers, save percentage, goals against, and his win total, all amazing. The problem for me is once he got to the playoffs, he wasn't special. He really did not add much for this team. They didn't win the Tampa Bay series because of him and his play. They won because they scored a crap ton of goals, and Tampa couldn't do much with the puck. But I do think he has a chance to continue to be a solid starting goaltender, at least in the regular season. And then when I look at Joseph Woll, we got to see a little bit of him last year in the playoffs. I don't want to say he impressed me a lot, but he showed potential. For a young backup goaltender, that's huge. I mean, showing some signs of being potentially successful if something does happen to Sammy and he goes down. I mean, he's had a few injuries in his career, so it's nice to have stability. I think for the price they pay for the two of these guys, it's a decent pair. All right, guys, now we got to get to the fun part here. We got to talk about our predictions for this season, standings-wise. We talked a little bit about each of these teams. Now we're going to put on the screen here how we both thought these standings would finish by the year's end. As you can see here, we both got the Toronto Maple Leafs in first. I kind of get why. I mean, you can say on your end why, but for me, I just think of all these teams, they're actually the most complete right now. They gained a lot in the offseason, and we know what their big star players can do, especially in the regular season. I know a lot of people will rip this team and say that they choke in the playoffs, but hey, we're not talking about the playoffs yet. We'll save that for April. Right now, Toronto's got to be number one.
Yep, and as you can see, the second is where we have a switch. I have Ottawa at second, and Scott has Tampa in second. Honestly, both of these teams are very, very good, especially Tampa. I think Tampa is a very proven team. It's an easy pick to put at number 2, but I think I like to take the risky route, and I like Ottawa. I like what they did off season. I like how this team looks. I think this team is ready to win now, actually. They're ready to make the playoffs right now.
Yeah, I like Ottawa's chances to have a really good season too.
Yeah.
The reason I give Tampa Bay the edge and put them at 2 instead of 3 is I think that they're a very proven team. They did lose a bit, but they didn't lose any of their core center of players. They still got Victor Hedman, Kucherov, Point, Stammer, and Vasi. I mean, when you got that core of 5, especially how it's spread out, defense, offense, goaltending like that, and you know you're going to have 2 really good centers down the middle, which is huge. Not a lot of teams have that kind of thing where they could have 2 50-goal centers. So I think that Tampa's still, even though they'll fall back a bit, I think they're still going to be number 2.
Yeah, I can't argue with that point. I mean, Tampa's an extremely good team. They're a very proven team. But I like the excitement of the Ottawa Senators.
They're a fun team.
They're a fun team to watch. They're to me, I think they're the most fun team to watch this upcoming season. Just because I want to see how all this team, how everyone gels together. On paper, this team looks so deep.
That's the thing, right? We made this mistake last year when we did our projections. On paper versus reality. We'll see if they can live up to the hype. Let's talk about number 4 here. We both had Boston. for me, I'm not trying to hate on Boston. I just think they had one of the worst possible off seasons you could have had. They lost an awful lot, especially of core players. And I don't know if they're going to be able to sustain the production they had. I mean, in my mind, I know they're not going to do what they did last year because that was record-setting talent. But I think they're still going to be good enough to hold on for the last wild card spot.
Yeah, I mean, that defensive depth is unreal. It's still a top defensive core, in my opinion. It's a very good defense unit. On top of that, they have Vezina caliber goaltender in both Swayman and Ullmark. So this team is still very, very good. They're just, the question mark is they're not going to score as many goals as they did last season.
No, I think they're going to have to rely on a lot of wins that are going to be like 2-1, 3-2 games. And I think that's going to be their bread and butter for most of this season.
Yeah.
Looking at number 5 and 6 here, we kind of had a disagreement. Hohen with Florida at 5 and Buffalo at 6. I had Buffalo at 5 and Florida at 6. I'm just going to go over my reasoning here for this. I think Buffalo is a really good, exciting young team coming up. I think they kind of proved to a lot of people that they're almost there. They're not quite there, like for a playoff spot yet in my mind, but they're close. They're making big gains. Tage really popped off last year. I mean, we've seen great play now from Rasmus Dahlin, which we waited for years to see. I just think that they kind of have the pieces necessary if their goaltending and their bottom pair defense can step it up.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all, actually. I think Buffalo is a more exciting team to watch this upcoming season than the Florida Panthers. There's no question about it. They got all those young players. Buffalo has a terrific young team. Their defense, they got Rasmus Dahlin, who's a very exciting player to watch and all that stuff. My question mark is going to be on that goaltending. I don't know whether that goaltender... I know he's a exciting young goaltending, but we don't know. We don't know his track record right now. We don't know how he'll actually play. For all we know, Luka Pekkanen could be the starting goaltender in the end of the day. We don't know. A lot of question marks around this team. And on top of that, I'm not sure Tage Thompson. I like this player. Don't get me wrong. He's a good player, but I don't think he's going to replicate that 100-point season again. I just think he's a good player, but he's not that good.
Yeah, I think I'll take a small step back for sure.
Yeah, I think he'll definitely regress a little bit, but not by much.
Go over. Tell me about Florida then. Why do you got Florida there?
Florida, this was Florida I know they're gonna start the season with a lot of injuries, but you know what? I think they're just gonna somehow manage. Honestly,
find a way to.
They're just gonna find a way, but they're not gonna make the playoffs. As of right now, with these standings, I don't have Florida in the playoffs, and they're not gonna be a playoff team in my opinion. So that's a real step down from last year. But the thing is, I think when you have a team with Brandon Montour, you have Aaron Ekblad, you have Matthew Tkachuk. When these guys get healthy throughout the middle of the season, they're gonna help this team for sure.
Yeah, they're definitely going to need some help from guys like Anton Lundell and Ito Listerinen, stuff like that, to kind of like carry the weight, especially early. The reason I have Florida 6, I think they're a great team still. I mean, we just watched them go to the Cup final. I just think the post-Stanley Cup final relapse is going to happen, and I think they're going to lose a lot of points early in the standings, which could impact them being as low as 6th. And then finally, we got Detroit in 7 and Montreal in 8, both of us. I'm a little surprised, actually. I thought maybe Hohen would have Detroit higher than me. The reason I have Detroit at 7 and not higher up, yes, they went out and made a lot of additions. And yes, some of these players like DeBrincat are proven solid players. I think the problem is here, one, this division is absolutely loaded at the top, absolutely stacked. I mean, when you look at teams like Toronto, Tampa, Ottawa now, Boston, I mean, these are really, really proven good hockey teams, minus, I guess, Ottawa, but they have such an exciting roster. Detroit, for me, there's too much change. When you add that many new players, gelling and chemistry is probably going to be an issue, especially early in the season. Now, can they fix it? Yes, absolutely, they could fix it and become a pretty good surprise. But I just think it's a lot to change in 1 year.
Yeah, I mean, I have Detroit in 7th right now, but the thing is, it's a big wild card. This is one of those teams where I could be completely wrong and they can actually do it way better than I expect.
Oh, for sure.
Because they added so many new players to this team. It's like almost half the roster is different. Mm-hmm. This team can really surprise. If they gel quickly, they're going to do well. Nothing against Detroit. I think Detroit's a good team. Mo Seider shouldn't start the season like he did last season. He was horrific last season.
Yeah, he got out of the gate slow.
I don't think Mo Seider is going to be that bad. I think he's going to come out with a pretty revenge type of year. I think he's going to do pretty good.
Yeah, no more sophomore slump for him. He's a great defenseman. Like, this is not hate on Detroit for Detroit fans out there at all. This is more so just growing pains and how stacked the Atlantic is, overall. And then when we talk about Montreal here in 8, I think this one kind of speaks for itself, and that's not like a diss by any means. This one I feel very confident about, that they will be last in this division. I can't see how they're not. All these teams really ahead of them are pretty solid hockey clubs. Even like Detroit, who we had 7, is really good. Buffalo, really good. Like, these teams are really good teams. It's just Montreal is going to have to take a couple years. They have a really, really good young core right now. Guys like Goulet on the defensive end, Barron, and then of course on offense, Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky. Like, these guys are all probably going to be really, really solid players, and this team could be in the top 3 in like 2 years from now, for all we know. I just think right now they're going to experience growing pains, defensive struggles, because usually young players tend to struggle defensively a bit more than veterans. So I think that's going to cost them.
Yeah, could not have said it any better. I agree.
Yeah. Well, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed our first video back. We're excited to be back. We're excited to bring you guys more content. Hopefully it gets better, because we are a little rusty, but we're going to do our best, and we hope to see you in our next video. Take care.
Take care, guys. Bye.